Hey, what's up guys, it's Ben Bonk, and recently this guy named MistTree challenged me to a gamedev 1v1, where each of us would have 24 hours to make a game following a theme. However, every few hours, each of us would be given a random challenge made by the other person to spice things up, and the best game would win 1 whole cent. But I should mention that this video idea is basically a copy of Bargy and Polymar's Best Game Wins $1,000 series, so yeah, all credit really goes to them for the idea. Anyways, it sounded like a really cool challenge, so I agreed and we were on. I headed over to a random game jam theme generator, hit generate, and our theme was Death is Only the Beginning. This was honestly a pretty decent theme in my opinion, so I hopped into Google Docs to draft out some ideas as we had a 30-minute grace period. Right away, the idea for a game with only one level and every time the player dies, the level slightly changes really stood out to me. So I decided on that as the main gimmick for the game and thought that a platformer would suit this idea the best. I then thought that it would also be really cool to have a narrator for the game, as I just really like games with narrators for some reason. And this narrator would basically be a Let's Player acting like he was playing the game, reacting to things you do in the game. With this general concept down, I created a new Unity project, but before actually getting to work, we had to give each other our first challenge. MistTree made me roll this 20-sided dice and told me this.
What you have to do is you have to listen to this for 11 minutes while working on your game.
So I proceeded to listen to Rebecca Black's Friday for the next 11 minutes. It wasn't the most fun, but it wasn't too bad of a challenge to be honest. But onto the actual game, the clock started ticking down now and I had a lot to do and not a lot of time. I started off by setting up some basic player movement, so now the player could use WASD to move around on this platform. Next, since death is a pretty big part of this game, I wanted to make a way for the player to actually be able to die. So I set up a simple enemy script, so once the player collides with this enemy, or circle, they'll just die. I then started setting up an audio and death manager, and these objects would just be used to play the narrator's voice lines and keep track of the player's deaths to do different things when the player dies enough. Next, I made a simple camera follow system using Cinemachine to just follow the player on the X-axis. Now it's time to make some art. I know this isn't the most practical thing to do right now, but I always just like to get some art in early for some reason. I found this pretty neat looking color palette on LostSpec and started working on a basic tile set for the game. Shortly later, I finished this tile set up and started setting it up in Unity, which was a nice start. However, the game still needed a player, so back to Sprite I made this little guy, as well as his simple idle and run animation. Here's what all this art looked like set up in Unity, and I'm actually pretty happy with it to be honest. But inside of Discord, I was getting a call from MistTree, and it looked like it was time for our second challenge, so here's what he had to say.
Your challenge is to ask a stranger for a game idea and then implement it.
Oh boy, this was a bit of a curveball, but it had to be done. MistTree said that it was fine for me to choose a random member on my Discord server, so I did just that. I was scrolling through my members list and found this guy with a Peter Parker profile picture, and just cold called them on Discord.
How about like a monster catching thing like Pokemon?
Okay, let's just pretend he didn't say that. I didn't really want to have to rework this game from scratch, so I told him about what I made so far, and he gave me this idea instead.
I guess like you know in Cuphead you can dash through enemies.
Yeah,
like with the invisible? Go ahead.
Do that, smoke bomb?
Yeah.
Sure. So now I had to make a dash smoke bomb ability for the player, which threw me off track a little. But I got back to work and made this smoke bomb ability. Pretty much, the player could just press shift, which would give them a slight speed boost and make them be able to go through walls and enemies. This ability is an absolute mess, and I definitely could have fixed it, but let's just say all these bugs are features and part of the fun. Next up, I got back on track with the art and made the simple spike sprite, and basic enemy. I set these up in Unity and made some basic logic for the enemy. It's nothing amazing, but I think these enemies were a good start. Moving on, I had all these sprites done, but no actual level to play through. I spent a bunch of time creating this simple level for the player, so now we kinda had a playable game. Sort of. But somehow this had all taken a few hours, and it's time for another checkup on MistTree. We showed each other what we had created so far, and he was working on this neat little puzzle game where once getting hit by a projectile, the player would switch forms, giving them different types of movement to help beat the level. But it was also time for challenges, and this time around, I wasn't allowed to
Code for 1 hour. You can do anything else but coding.
Yeah, this was kinda rough. Prior to this, I literally just spent the past few hours just working on non-coding related things such as art and level design, so this was just really unfortunate timing. I decided to take the first half an hour of this challenge just not working on my game at all and just getting a bit of dinner and relaxing. But for the last half an hour, I decided to work on some basic music for the game, and I ended up with this monstrosity. Look, I know it sounds terrible, and as much an excuse as this sounds, I kinda want it to sound terrible to fit the game's kinda eerie and unfinished mood that I was going for. And I also just suck at making music, so it's a win-win, I guess. While I was at it, I also just made some really basic sound effects in SFXR. By now, I still had a few minutes left where I couldn't code, so I just started working on the narrator script. The plan was that this narrator, or let's player, found this old video game that you're playing on his dad's old computer. Things seem normal at first, but after dying more and more, strange things start to happen, such as the environment changing a little, or messages popping up. Super cliche and goofy, I know. Looking back, I'm not really sure why I went with this idea, but after finishing a few of the voice lines for the narrator, I was able to code again, so I got back to work. As part of the story for the game, I thought it'd be cool to have a creepy black screen once the player finishes the level, almost like the game was left unfinished. Then there would be this weird panel that would appear if the player walked in the black area, prompting them to input a code. In order to obtain this code, the player would have to die a bunch to progress. Again, looking back, not the best idea for story or gameplay, but that's what I went with. So I finished up this panel, and once entering the correct code, the player would be able to enter this mysterious void. But now, it was time for another challenge. This was that I had to replace one game object in my game with a turd. So I made this turd, and yeah, I really have no clue what I'm doing with my life. Now this spike was gone and a turd was in. Don't ask questions. Next up, I realized that the dash was way more broken than I realized, but it's okay I guess, and I also made a scene transition when the player dies. I then just spent a bunch of time working on the ending to the game once the player finds the code, which I'd love to show you, but I really don't want to spoil the game, so you have to play the game to find out. I also wrapped up the script for the narrator and recorded all the needed voice lines. I imported these into Unity and into my audio manager. To wrap up the day, I wanted something easy to work on, so I figured I'd just make this simple start screen for the game. And I named the game The Conclusion to try to make it sound somewhat mysterious and spooky. And with that said, that was the end of the first day. I woke up bright and early the next day, and I was feeling pretty good. I only had about 4 hours left to work on the game, but I didn't have too much left to do. I started off the day by setting up all the narration and death effects into the game. I wanted to make sure that some spooky stuff happened when the player dies too much. And just as I was getting a good grasp on things, MistTree gave me a call and it was time for our last challenge.
Your challenge is to touch the closest gym to your house.
Oh boy, it was 8 AM and time to hop on my bike. So yeah, I reached the gym, touched it, rode home, and half an hour of my valuable time was gone. But back to work, I mainly just focused on wrapping things up. I finalized the whole game loop and did a ton of testing to make sure that weird things would happen every few deaths. I then switched my focus over to doing a bit of polish. I added in a ton of post-processing to the game. Maybe a bit too much admittedly, but I think it helped a lot in achieving the creepy retro feel I was going for. I then did a bit more testing, changed a few small things, and built the game with about an hour left in the challenge. At this point, I was feeling pretty good. I made a basic itch.io page, created this cool little cover art in Photoshop, and started testing the web build of the game. And soon enough, my excitement plummeted. For some reason, the web build just wouldn't work. After playing the game for a few minutes, it would just randomly hit the player with this gibberish message. I really had no clue what to do, so I spent the next half an hour trying to get a working web build up and running, all to no avail. So that's really unfortunate, and I have no clue what caused the issue, but thankfully the desktop build seemed to work fine, so I just went with that. Now both of our games were done, so we played each other's. MistTree made this interesting puzzle game, and if you want to learn more about his game and see his perspective of the challenge, check out the devlog on his channel. But now, it was time to see who the winner was. MistTree and I sent our games off to 2 judges, the first being N8Dev, and here are our reactions to his decision.
So, the winner of this game dev competition is one of the game developers that participated. The winner of this game dev competition
Yes.
that wins the prize is Ben Bonk.
This was awesome, but to seal the deal, we had Vimlark plan to rate our games on stream, and this is what he had to say.
I think Bimbog, congratulations. I would call you the winner on this one.
So it's official, I'm now 1 cent richer. I'm not really sure what I'll do with the money, but I'm sure I'll put it to good use. So if you want to play the game, the link is in the description. Just don't expect anything amazing. I'm really happy with what I was able to make in only 24 hours, but there are a whole bunch of flaws in the game, and overall it's just a bit goofy and could have been way better executed. But that's all for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.